you got to realize that whatever you're doing, you're competing with somebody. What is it that gives you an advantage over your competition? Whatever you're good at, try to be great at it. And if you're great at it, good things will happen.
Maverick Podcast.
I'm far from average. That's why I had to come sit down and chop it up with DJ Maverick. They know my name from coast to coast and even in Dallas. I use my talent when I'm faced with a challenge. Gratitude strength is my magnet. Close your eyes and imagine. If you can see it in your mind, then you can have it.
Maverick Podcast.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. This is a Maverick Podcast. I'm your host, DJ Maverick. Today we have a rock star in the building, the one and only Chief Executive Weirdo of Make Oklahoma Weirder, the one and only Evan Jarvix. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we dive in, for the 1% of the people out there that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
To the 1%. If the 99% were to say something, they'd probably say, I'm a music scene guy, especially Oklahoma City. Came up in Oklahoma City, live in Oklahoma City. I'm really into original, local, diverse music that's just around everywhere. And sometimes you got to dig for it. But once you get tapped in, it's just, there's tons of amazing talent, tons of great albums just being released all the time. And I just really try to keep my finger on that pulse. And I partially do that through Make Oklahoma Weirder, which is a music blog I started about 6 years ago. And yeah, people know me as that sort of identity, like the chief executive weirdo of Oklahoma City.
Yeah, that's cool. So but you're kind of one of the NBA coaches that also played, right? So you were also a musician.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yes.
So
and
maybe we should start there. You started
sure.
off as a musician, so you kind of know what you're talking about.
I
right?
technically am still a musician. I'm just not quite as active as I was because everything else has gotten more of a priority in my life, I suppose. But yeah, I started. A lot of things in my life went squirrely, and I was like, well, I've always wanted to play music. Now's the time. Let me just try this out. And so I just kind of started putting stuff up on anonymously. I didn't know about all the rich musical scene stuff that's just everywhere. Yeah. Because I was kind of brought up in the Moore, Oklahoma area. I was just really sheltered and didn't know about like the Flaming Lips. I didn't know that they were from here until I was in college. Like I had no idea. And so once I kind of got exposed to that, which I credit to The Spy having the Oklahoma Rock Show and Norman Music Festival, when it was really starting to go, I was realizing, wow, all this stuff is here. Yeah. I had no idea. And so I started kind of bravely doing the open mic thing, kind of getting over my stage fright and my nerves and writing songs and just trying my hand at making music and doing things that I thought was kind of unique to myself and telling stories that were different. And I just realized, wow, this is a really cool place to be. And I don't know exactly how to get in. I don't know exactly where the connections are. And a lot of it is networking and knowing people who know people. And I just kind of realized not only was I dealing with that, but there were a lot of people like me who were kind of on the outside looking in. And I was like, well, I'd like to, do something for those people. I want to like provide a way in to this scene that I didn't know existed for the longest time. And so I started writing album reviews just for a local blog. There's a publishing company here called Literati Press. Okay. And they had a blog for a little while, and they reached out to me and asked if I'd want to write for them. That's cool. Just because I hadn't really established myself as a writer. I think they just liked my perspective on things. And I was like, well, I want to write about local music. Yeah. And so they just said, go for it.
Did you have stuff out there on the web that they checked out, or how did they even get, how were you on the radar all of a sudden?
Well, I got to know them just as friends. Like they used to do a lot of public events, and I just kind of got to know them. And yeah, I think they were just looking to try cultivating talent. And I just kind of took to it because I've always kind of had a natural inclination to writing. And it just kind of happened. I kind of, got my sea legs or whatever. And it's
cool. You watch Needle Drop?
I do watch the Needle Drop. Okay. Yeah.
He has some pretty controversial reviews.
He does. Yeah. I like Needle Drop a lot. It's very different because when you're on video, it's he always calls it new media because it's like the old media is actually writing words out and but yeah, I've tried video a couple times. I'm just not good enough with all the equipment and the editing.
It's a whole thing. We were talking about that before we started.
We were.
But he actually also introduces comedy to it, where he plays like his uncle or something.
Oh yeah, his roommate Cal Chesta.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who dropped a whole rap album at one point in character.
It's just funny to go down the comment sections when it's like a big album drop from like Kanye or Drake or somebody, and he completely roasts it.
Yeah.
You just go to the comments and it's like a war zone, you know?
It is. Yeah. I am nowhere close to that, but I do like folks like Anthony Fantano. Mm-hmm. Probably primarily the Needle Drop is where I get a lot of my news.
Okay.
Music news, and it's just like a nice, easygoing way of getting to know what's going on in current events in the music world. So.
Yeah. And you also did some writing for the Gazette, right?
I did, yeah.
Some publishing there. So that's pretty cool. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So the Gazette actually approached me, which was nice because I approached them at one point and then just things didn't line up. And then they went through a couple of leadership changes. I think they changed ownership at one point. And then somebody was like, hey, I need a music writer. Everybody says you're the guy.
Nice. That's awesome.
And I was like, all right, well, let me see what I can do. I consider myself somewhat unconventional to journalism because a lot of journalism, like I don't have a degree. I wasn't brought up in it. I've literally just done it through learning as I do and experience, and just a lot of it is just research and knowledge. Like anybody can do that. And if you practice, you can get good at it. And
I mean, it's kind of like radio, right? A lot of people go learn, communications or whatever, get a degree, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be great at radio, right?
Sure. Yeah. And a lot of it is also kind of like journalism is kind of a dying art form. There's a lot of pressure to just spit stuff out constantly, put headlines that may not be totally accurate to get clicks. And like, I wasn't about any of that. Like, I just want to do it for the music, man. So cool. I did get a journalism award out of that though, which was really cool. It was really validating because I typically can, the imposter syndrome is strong. Like there's a lot of great writers out there, but I threw my hat into the ring for the Great Plains Journalism Awards for last year. And I won first prize for review writing based on some stuff that I sent in from 2022. So
okay, awesome. So what would you say you enjoy more, performing, writing, all the above? Like I'm seeing you're kind of like into different things, right?
It's there's a lot of, it's definitely got more complicated and complex as I've gone, just because there's so many new opportunities coming from all angles.
Yeah.
And I gotta take them. They're so cool and I love them. And I think probably maybe the one thing that I like the most that's been really fulfilling is I host a residency down at Opolis in Norman every month. Okay. And I don't even know if I told you this, but
I don't think so.
Yeah. So
I'm just learning all kinds of new stuff.
I know. Awesome. I do a thing called Weirder Wednesday, and it's the fourth Wednesday of the month down at Opolis in Norman. And we are coming up on our 1 year anniversary. We started back in June of 2023. And it was actually an adaptation from a thing I did at Hubbly Bubbly Hookah Lounge called Mental Mondays. And so if you know Hubbly Bubbly, it's mostly hip hop, R&B,
poetry sometimes.
Yeah, poetry sometimes, some spoken word stuff. And I mean, they've had all kinds of cool stuff out there. A lot of neo soul. They have an acoustic night. Tusabes was a thing for a while. Okay, which was like a Latin dance thing. But they were looking to shake up their offerings, and they were like, well, what would you want to do? And I was like, well, what can I do?
So once again, they reached out to you.
Well, they did. They did. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'll name drop Jim Conway real quick. Shout out to Conway for taking a chance on me, because it's kind of tricky to be in an environment like that and being so outside of that. Like I definitely pay attention to hip hop locally. Like I know a lot of artists know me, but like I don't come from that world. And so to be brought into that world is really special. And so, but then they let me do experimental music. Okay. And so that's what Mental was for, experimental Mondays.
Okay, I got it.
And so I did that for a year there. And then we moved it down to Opolis because it was just a better fit. Yeah. But it's been going for a couple years, and it's just my opportunity to throw a bunch of weird artists together that nobody knows and let them do what they want without a lot of boundaries. And so we've had like a cellist who does really crazy, like, discordant arrangements and looping stuff with like live looping. We've had, there's an amazing, her name's Chaslyn Rook, and she's currently studying jazz fiddle at UCO.
Okay.
And she brings the craziest ideas. The last time she was on a show, she did this ode to the groundhog for Groundhog's Day. And it was like she had brought all these wind chimes on stage played like a dulcimer. Okay. I've had electronic musicians. Alex from the band Shift has some really great modular synth stuff and improvises these big ideas, and meteorology does like some really cool guitar stuff and just all kinds of stuff.
Cool.
And
so you're like the curator of the vibes of this weekly venue, and you sort of handpick all the
right. Yeah,
artists?
I handpick everybody, and I try to draw people from different corners of the scene, so that they can like get to meet each other. Okay, because like I've even drawn from like the college world, like, hey, come out here and do a composition. I had an opera one time that was from Opera on Tap, which is a local chapter of a bigger organization that's all about bringing opera to the people and having like arias in the middle of like crowded bars and stuff. Okay. And so they do a thing called the 10-minute opera festival. And so I booked one of those operas that was an opera about bowling that had 3 different vocalists on it. And yeah, just, you know, I've gotten around enough where I see all these cool things that are happening. And a lot of these cool things don't necessarily always know that the other cool things are happening. And certainly the audience members are going to get something new. Like it's very rare that I book a whole lineup that's going to give you something you've seen before.
Does that usually work? Because I think, you know, if a crowd is a hip hop crowd or R&B crowd, and then all of a sudden you've got like death metal or something. Oh, sure. What's the vibe like? Do they appreciate that, or what do you?
It's something you got to grow. Yeah. It's definitely not, and that's why it probably means the most to me, because it's not made for the everyday audience. It's for people who are actually craving and seeking something different, something underground, something experimental. And so we've kind of built a little bit of a following. It's small, but it's very, like, we don't get folks in there who are like talking over the music or there to drink. Like, they're there for the music, and they come and they experience and they applaud and they just really engage with music on this level that if you tried to bring it to a broader audience, a lot of people aren't going to get it. And certainly I've seen that. And I couldn't really try and adapt this to like a bigger thing, because it's inevitably going to be like, we book some noisy stuff sometimes. Like we had, there's this guy from Tulsa. Not Tulsa. Well, we did have a guy from Tulsa, but a guy from Stillwater who just does this brutal noise. And it's like, it's one of those things that makes you question, is this even music? Oh, wow. And like certain people, like one time we had a couple who kind of came in, not sure what they expect. And we warned them, and they still stuck around, and they left after the first act. They were like not getting it, but that's okay, because
cool. You're pushing the boundaries.
That's the thing.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
That's the whole idea. And it's been really rewarding to not only give people the space to do that, but like seeing people come out of that and come up with new ideas and thrive in new ways. Like, I've given people their first shows here because there's no place else that'll book what they're doing.
That's awesome.
And I'm not the only one. There's a new thing called Dissociation OK down in Norman that started up a little after I did stuff. And they're really, like, if you're into ambient music, noise music, drone music, they got it. Okay. They got it. I don't feel so pressured to do it because they're doing it.
That's cool.
But I'm bringing in other weird stuff too. So.
Yeah. We haven't even gotten into KOSU, right?
Oh my goodness, there's so much to talk about. That's another thing on your list too, right? So you're also doing a weekly. Is that a weekly radio show or what? Yes. So it's not my radio show, but I have a segment on the radio show. Okay. There's a lovely woman named Lindsay Cox. She is the talent buyer, the booker for Factory Obscura down on Automobile Alley, and she's also in the band Stepmom. And they gave her a radio show last year. And one of the big things with Factory Obscura is the future is collaborative. And so she wanted to bring different people on to do segments. And I was like, hey, I've got this segment that I did during the pandemic. Would you want it? And she was like, sure. And now we've been doing it for a year or so.
That's cool. What's the segment about? Just
Yeah.
music, or what do you do?
It is music.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of my big things about covering music is like I want to focus on original music. I want to focus on local music. I want to focus on diverse music, stuff that's actually coming from like new voices that I feel like are being unheard. And so it's called Jarvix's Hot Dog Song of the Week. We launched a few weeks ago.
You can't just brush over the hot dog. I'm definitely curious about the hot dog. How does that?
A lot of people are.
So I'm picturing you reviewing while you're eating a hot dog or something. I don't know what's going on.
We gotta go back to the pandemic for that. So my buddy Mike McVeigh, shout out to Mike. He had a podcast during the pandemic, and it's still around, but it was definitely thriving during the pandemic, where he did a thing called Nobody's a Nobody, and it was literally about just interviewing regular people. Like, you don't necessarily have a headline to you. You're just somebody that I've met, and let's just talk about your life.
Got it.
And it was really cool and really powerful. And he knew me from music, and we're mutual fans of each other's work. He's also into improv comedy, and so he had a lot of improv comedians on there, and has worked with Toastmasters, and so he had a lot of like speech people on.
Okay.
But
so it's not like an accountant or something. Like, tell me about your.
Oh, well, there is sometimes.
Some of that? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he even like interviewed his daughter one time.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, let's just talk about your life for a little bit. And sometimes it is stuff like that, but those happen to be the ways that he was meeting people. So it tended to be that stuff. But he wanted me to do a thing for it. And I was like, well, I have this idea. And it was the Song of the Week idea. It became the Hot Dog Song of the Week because he was insistent on using a specific like jingle as the theme song.
Okay.
And it's my opening track from my album Toe Tunes, which is called Hot Dog.
I didn't know if you were going to go to the Mickey Mouse, the Hot Dog, Diggity Dog. Have you
Oh, I do know that song. I do know that
I
song.
thought that's where you were headed.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I've gotten comparisons to They Might Be Giants before, and they're the ones who did that song.
Okay.
So. But yeah, it
the
comes from that
there
song.
From your song. Yeah.
The connections from my song. He would always play my song. It's like a 10-second song. It's just a goofy little intro to an album that I did like back in 2014. And so it became Jarvix's Hot Dog Song of the Week. Nice. And then whenever we moved it to the radio, it's just kind of there. We don't play that anymore. Lindsay actually wrote me a brand new jingle that now plays at the beginning of every podcast.
Cool. But, so would it be a spoiler if you tell us the song of this week or
no? Well, let's see. Because this is going to drop on a Monday, right?
Yeah, this is going to drop next week.
So the one that we just heard, that's dropping literally when this episode's dropping. My episode's also dropping on KOSU. That song is going to be from a band called Empress in Tulsa. They have a new song called Liberal Pansies. It's really good. I talk about flowers. And then the forthcoming one, I think, is actually going to be the new Jay and the Bishop song.
Okay. Yeah. Shout out to them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm super stoked about that project.
Dude, I know.
It's very cool.
Like you said on the episode, you got the first dibs on it. So literally listening to that episode was like my research. And I'm like, okay, now I know what's going on with Jose.
That's super exciting. So you do that. So the Factory Obscura, you also curate a night there too, or what?
I do a few things with Factory Obscura.
Yeah.
I have an open mic that I host there every first Thursday of the month.
Okay.
So that's a collaboration with them and me. We have an online sign up and it's open for people to come in. It's not just music. It's all art forms. We just ask that you be respectful and of a certain, edgelords need not apply. Just because it's such a sensitive space because it's inside of the mixtape experience.
Yeah. I still haven't been there. I know it's super cool looking.
It is.
I always see it on Instagram all the time. I need to physically go check it out.
Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah.
I know they're opening a new thing really soon.
Okay.
Called I won't remember it, but there's a stage inside the Wonder Room called the Wonder Stage. So there's like a full sound system. You have a whole stage. I'm a host. There's like everything's really well produced. Yeah. And it's an open mic that anybody can just hop on there.
And the vibe is different than what you're doing over in Norman or what?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The thing in Norman is like I choose music that I want to have on a show. Mm-hmm. And then the thing at Factory Obscura is pretty open season for other people to come in. And it's not exclusively music. It's comedy, it's dance, it's poetry. It's all kinds of different art forms. We had drag one time. We've had puppetry. So like we're down for all the performative art forms. We've had performance art even.
Yeah, you were telling me that you were actually doing a show with Rubio, right?
Oh,
At the one time he was like sort of painting.
Uh-huh.
You were providing the jams for that.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool.
That was fun because we both improvised.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was I think my second ever event with Factory Obscura way back before they were at Mixtape. They had a spot on the south side that they had temporarily an installation for, and they have a series called Future of Sound Sessions, and this was one of their first attempts to do that. And it was their whole thing is they pair a musician with another disciplinary artist. And so we had live painting with live music.
It's a cool idea because you're kind of like feeding off of one another, right? So I feel like you would probably like influence the painting that's going on depending on what you're playing.
Yeah,
right?
you would think so. I'm not totally sure how successful ours was. I feel like we both just kind of noodled around and we're like, well, that's what we came up with.
That's cool.
But there's a lot of fun in that too.
So have you always been into music? It seems like no matter what like avenue you're exploring, it's always like music related one way or
Certainly.
another, right?
Well, I think part of that is also just like my brain likes to compartmentalize things. And so like I recognize all the different arts that are out there, and like the culinary arts is a big thing. Like we'll probably talk about that later even, but it's not something that I feel like, oh, that's my thing. Yeah. Like the music thing, it's my thing. And it's something that I just kind of like sought out, but also a thing that has also been kind of assigned to me in a way. Like people think of me as the music thing. And so I think it keeps me focused, and it allows me to really narrow down on a certain thing. So I don't like, when I was a kid, I really liked drawing. I could have been a visual artist, you know. There's like a lot of different things. I went to school for architecture.
No way. Okay.
Yeah. OSU has a very difficult program. But music just kind of made a lot of sense to me. And I think in terms of art, for me, it is probably the place where I feel the most comfort and belongingness. Like I feel like it's one of those things that transcends cultural and language barriers like other art doesn't. And I believe that it's an avenue for unity and understanding. And that's a big part of what Make Oklahoma Weirder is, because that's part of the slogan. Is it's not just like, hey, let's get weird and weird people out. It's, you know, there's definitely a thing to be said for, you know, disturb the comforted and comfort the disturbed, right? But more so, it's about, it's a way to just encourage open-mindedness and encourage adventure. And so I think the more that we create a culture that accepts weirdness as it is, because to me, weirdness is not an inherently good or bad thing. It's neutral. And so like, you don't stop there. You want to go further and say, well, why is it weird? And if it's off-putting, what is it about that? If it isn't, what is it about that? And so by kind of channeling this exploration through music, it's just a way of, I mean, this is a big philosophical thing, but music, I just think, at least in my experience, I mean, it's given me a place to belong where I felt like I didn't have a place.
That's really cool.
You know?
Platform for others, right?
Yeah,
So
and that's, again, going back to Weirder Wednesday, like this last December, I did a show where, you know, I had some folks who ended up like signing a little card that was like, thank you for doing this.
That's cool.
Because like, really, it's people who don't have anywhere else to do their art because, you know, it takes somebody with the connections and the open-mindedness to like make a space like that. And I've just gradually gotten to a place where I've been able to get that.
So when you first sort of came up with the Oklahoma Weirder idea, you just wanted to have a blog, or what was like the original idea?
That was the idea. Well, so technically, when I was still focusing more on myself as a musician, which I'm still a musician, I still play shows. By the time you're listening to this, I just played in Claremore, actually. Okay. I'll be there on Saturday doing some music for an alligator festival.
Awesome.
I wanted some cool merch. I wanted something that wasn't just like my name on a shirt. I was like, what would be like a cool thing? And, you know, I'm a natural writer. I always love words. Like even when I'm drawing, like these days, I tend to draw words.
Okay.
So it kind of came to me as I was doodling and brainstorming. And I was like, make Oklahoma weirder. Like, you know, it's based on Keep Austin Weird.
Yeah.
Which I acknowledge, but it's like, it's its own thing.
Right.
It's a whole different thing. And so I put that on a shirt. People liked it. People who had no idea who I was liked it, bought the shirt. And at that point, I was like looking for a new blog name because I had written for like 3 or 4 different publications for that point, and they all disappeared.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I can go find another one.
That's an important lesson, right? Because if you're doing content for different places, even on social media, and if that goes away, if you don't have your own personal space,
I know.
All of a sudden you're gone, right?
Yes.
I see that all the time where people like build an audience on TikTok, for example. What if TikTok goes away? Right. Yeah.
I do want to thank the folks that I worked with for letting me hold on to ownership of my writings, because Literati Press and Cellar Door Music Group I also worked for. Both of them, we were able to archive all of that stuff, and all of those writings are now on Make Oklahoma Weirder.
Okay.
So we saved it. I didn't hold on to the stuff from Red Dirt Report. That stuff I think is gone for good. But that is a very important lesson, and certainly having a central hub for my own stuff. Yeah. Like even if you're not sure what you're doing, like have a website for yourself. Like,
even if it's your personal brand, let's say I'm a developer or whatever, it's always good to have that one hub where you direct people and then you decide where you want to launch them up from that point, right?
Right, absolutely. And honestly, I should have one. I have Make Oklahoma Weirder, and I also have Jarvix.net for the music stuff, but I should really have like a central, like just myname.com or something. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you decided on the blog because I hate writing, right? Like I would 1,000 times rather do audio or video and express what I'm thinking that way versus writing. Yeah. To me, writing is a little bit challenging. So it almost feels like you have to be inspired to write. Is that the case for you or no?
You know, I don't think so. No. I differ from people on this because music's the same way. You know, you have to be inspired to write the song. Yeah. But I'm not that way. I always have ideas, always have inspiration back there. And even when I don't have inspiration, there's a certain labor to it that I know I can work and find something. If I dig, I'll find something. And so there's a million things I want to write about at any given time. There's so much cool stuff happening. I'm never going to be short of material.
So you never get the stereotypical writer's block. You're always like, I'm going to write, and then you just let it flow, or what?
Well, if I have the writer's block, it's just because of energy and capacity, you know, which is real. Like I put a lot of work into my writing. Like I'm kind of a slow writer, which again, I say like in terms of journalism being kind of like this really fast paced thing. I don't really operate that way. I really spend a lot of time. I really articulate and I really like craft these sentences where I think about like every single word and how it flows. And you know, it's kind of a flow state thing. I'm sure you know all about that. Like definitely. You gotta like set all the parameters just right and like be in the spot. And then all of that's going to come out.
Are you a pen and a pad, or are you on a laptop?
I'm on a laptop.
iPad, laptop. Okay.
I've done pen and pad before, but I edit as I write also. I don't necessarily go draft 1, draft 2, draft 3. Like I try and get it all as perfect as I can the first time. And it never is, but it's usually pretty good. And so, yeah, I have to like make the space, make the time, make the right mental energy. And then usually I can just like spend 4 hours and come out with like an award-winning album review, which I did because that's how Chat Pile happened. I did a Chat Pile review. And like, just like that. And it was one of those things I won an award for.
Awesome. So it sounds like Make Oklahoma Weirder started off as a blog, but now it's evolving.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like much of your other endeavors, it's evolving, and now you're doing shows with it, or what?
Doing shows. The Weirder Wednesday. It happens every month. We've already talked about that. And then the reason I'm wearing this necktie, for those of you who are listening and not watching, if you're like me, because I like to tune in to the audio portion. I am currently wearing a pumpkin necktie in celebration of Halloween.
Been meaning to ask you about that.
Which is kind of silly because it's summer. Yeah. But a couple years ago, we started doing a thing called Halloween in May, which was originally going to happen in 2020. Pandemic happened. But we started it back up in 2022. And so now it's our 3rd year. And we're doing a thing called Halloween in May, which is one of the events that we now do every year. We do other stuff. We pop up at like vendor markets sometimes because we sell local band cassette tapes. That's a rabbit hole.
Like actual
cassette tapes.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're a big geek audiophile too?
You would think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I saw a need for it. And so I got myself involved in it just because I saw that there was a growing market for cassette tapes. There's a lot of local artists, especially like rock bands, that are putting new material out on cassettes.
Flaming Lips, they do it all the time.
Oh, well, they'll put music on anything.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Actually, they just did a Exploder, the Song Exploder.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to
I haven't seen it, but yeah.
I think it just dropped. So check it out. Yeah.
Do You Realize is the song.
Yeah. Cool.
But just like a lot of random stuff has kind of come up. Like,
why Halloween though? What's the connection with Halloween?
It's a riff on Christmas in July.
Okay.
So it's like for those folks who just can't wait till Christmas.
Yeah.
There's also folks who love Halloween. It's their favorite time of year. They love spooky season, and I'm like, we should do something for those people.
So people come dressed up and everything.
Yeah.
It's like a whole thing. Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah. Hey, I'll flip this thing.
Yeah, let's do it. You brought that. This is the official flyer here.
This is the
if you want to
flyer.
hold it up to the camera there.
Sure.
So it's going down May 25th, right?
May 25th.
Okay.
Yes. So if you're hearing this when this episode drops, it's this Saturday.
It's perfect. Yeah, it's going to line up perfectly.
So we are at Resonant Head on Calle dos Cinco. And this poster, by the way, I want to shout out Sofia Arenas did this for us. Who's a Guatemalan artist. I think knocked it out of the park.
Shout out to her.
Yeah. So just because we're in that venue this year, we kind of venue hop from year to year. And I just wanted to really be intentional about respecting the community and not just kind of coming in and like, hey, let's do a party and then bounce like, see ya. Because I don't know, I've been to some events out down that way. And sometimes I feel like if you're not from there, you don't necessarily always see what's going on there. And so
it is changing for,
a lot of it.
It's not the same place that it used to be.
Right.
So it's definitely different now.
Yeah. But
so tell me about the lineup, because you got a crazy lineup for this,
So another fun thing about the Halloween concept is you don't necessarily have to know the artists. There's a greater idea of what's going on. You can still have fun without knowing all the songs and knowing all the artists. But we try to pick genres that are maybe a little bit underrepresented in the scene and that also kind of vibe with Halloween. And so it's another, just like the other stuff we do, it's a great way of cross-pollinating the different areas. So our headliner is Medicine Horse from Tulsa. They are a doom sludge metal band from Tulsa. They're on Horton Records right now, and they're also indigenous and kind of have like this really interesting perspective on how that sort of doom lyricism comes through in something like, thinking about Mother Earth and things like that. And thinking about, the displacement of Native peoples. Like there's a lot of like brutal stuff that we do to people. And you don't need to conjure fantasy things from like Dungeons and Dragons to have epic songs. Like it's here.
Right.
So Medicine Horse, I'm really excited about. Also female fronted. So if you love your lady growls,
awesome.
That'll be great. Yeah. Medicine Horse, really excited to have them down. They put an album out last year. It's great. Mars Deli is going to be here as well. Hip hop. Also a bit of R&B, especially if you listen to his last album.
Okay.
Mars Deli is part of Sativa Prophets. So if you've ever heard of Sativa Prophets, they're kind of like a hip hop collective that's been around for over a decade. And Mars is one of the most animated of them. And they're all very animated. But they've all been doing a lot of cool solo stuff lately. And so Mars had an album called Pink Palace a couple years ago. And that will probably be part of the set. But Mars also loves to dress up.
Awesome.
Yeah, Mars Deli was the primary organizer for a thing called the Pajama Jammy Jam at the Speakeasy in OKC for a number of years, where it was like, hey, everybody comes out dressed in their nightwear.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, so Mars is great.
Cool.
I've got Bad Athlete, which is really fun because they have released Halloween-y sounding songs outside of the season. Like a few years ago, they dropped I can't remember if it's the Witch song or the Scream Queen song, but it was like January. It was like, it's a brand new year. We're going to do a Halloween song.
Awesome.
So they're kind of like a garage rock thing. And they just put out an EP, I think, earlier this year. And then I've got Lane's Heathen Boots, which is a pretty darn new project. It's Lane Bergeron from Norman, who's part of Opolis. I mention Opolis a lot here, but they're good friends of ours at this point. Like, we've just really vibed with them a lot, and they let us do a lot of fun stuff. So Lane has this long history of electronic music, trying a lot of different stuff out. Lane had a project called Lane and the Laters that was something that I described on my radio segment because I played one of their songs for my first ever segment.
All right, so it sounds like the Halloween in May has a whole theme, right? You have a costume contest, you've got the candy, you have the bands dressing up.
Yeah,
Tell me,
that's my favorite part is the band's dressing up.
and it sounds like it's going to line up perfectly with the vibe, everything that they're bringing to the
I think
thing,
so.
right?
I think so. It's gone really well the past couple of years, and I think it's going to be our best year so far. I'm really excited for it.
Food too, right? Okay.
Because one of your episodes has our food vendor.
Awesome.
Tortilla.
Lupita. Right?
Lupita, yeah.
Shout out to those guys. Those guys are awesome.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, they've been great to work with. So they'll be on site again. Part of that, like trying to keep it in the community.
Perfect.
Like,
you can't go wrong with tacos.
yeah,
right?
and there's a lot of people who haven't had them or
No way.
don't know about them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I only know about them because, well, I've done the research and I've listened to the episode. But like, they provide tortillas to a place up in OKC that I go to a lot, Flora Bodega. So
Got it.
Yeah.
So there are tickets involved, or how do
there are
people-
tickets.
Yeah.
If you want to get a pre-order, I guess you call them pre-order. It's like video game speak.
Pre-sale. Right?
Pre-sale.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. If you want to grab tickets now, you can at Pre-Kindle, I think is the service provider for that. But you can do so from our website. We have a dedicated webpage. If you go to makeoklahomaweirder.com, we have a little Halloween in May tab, and it tells you everything about what's going on.
Perfect.
Multiple ticket links. You can also go to Resident Head's website. They've got all their shows listed. All their ticket links are there as well. It's $15. I think there's a service fee if you do it online, and there's not one when you show up.
Okay.
It's always how it's going to be. We like it when you order ahead, so we have a head count, but there's a fee. So
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. So the other important piece to make Oklahoma Weirder, there's a submission page, right?
Yes,
so tell me about that, because I think
Uh-huh.
the whole providing platform, that's super cool that you're doing that.
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah, and please use it. The submission page is for if you want me to hear your music, that's my preferred way for you to let me know what you're doing. I'm always going to be interested in, following you online and everything. And if you've got all your social media and all your web presence done, like, I can do the research, but if you come to me and kind of make it a little bit easier and just say, here's a new thing I've got coming out, here's my info, like, it just goes a long way. And that's not just me, that's everybody. Like, that's the press game. Like, if you can meet somebody where they're at, as opposed to sending a post on Instagram that's like, hey, check out my new thing. Like, that might work for some people. It's direct, but it's like less professional and less organized. Like, I'm on social media for another purpose. Like, that is my dedicated space for submissions. And so, like, we have a whole dedicated email that both me and my partner, Electra, also helps cull through, and we might listen to stuff and let each other know, hey, this came through. It's really good. You should check it out. And like, I've written about, like, I think Ace Styles is somebody we wrote about who was like that, who was on The Voice, and I didn't even know.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And is literally a kid up in Tulsa who's like killing it. And like, that came through the submission, and I was like, yeah, this is great. So I wrote about him for the Gazette. And anyway, but yeah, I say that also because part of the reason I'm on this podcast, there's many reasons.
Yeah, I see that.
Very, very excited to be here.
You came prepared. I like it.
But you have a really unique audience, and the musicians that you've had on have been really great. I've recognized almost all of them, which is, thankfully, I've been doing my good work. But yeah, there's a big barrier language wise. Like, I'm English speaking person brought up in Oklahoma. And I don't know Spanish. Actively learning Spanish on Duolingo because it's free.
Yeah.
I've been on there for 2 years, and I can piece together some sentences if I have to.
So from here on out, we're going to finish out the podcast in Spanish, if that's cool with you.
No problema.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
You know, music or whatever, they can submit their.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Because I think I mentioned beforehand, Lee Hernan is how I found your work.
Okay.
Because I had known about Lee Hernan, but I was like, oh, she's mostly covering songs at clubs and doing popular stuff. And that's great. But I'm really trying to focus on people who are writing their own things, creating their own things. And then she started doing that. And I was like, whoa, okay, well, now I got to know about this. And so I've seen her perform a couple times, and I was able to talk about her music. And I played Cafecito on KOSU
really cool,
back in January, I think. So and there's a couple other bands. I think, is there a band called El Patrono or something?
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, they've got a couple of originals out there. Mm-hmm. And so I've got it to where the algorithm is starting to send me Spanish stuff.
Okay.
And I'm starting to see more of what's going on. But if you're out there and you're making original music, I don't care what genre it is. I don't care what language it's in. I know there's really cool stuff that I don't know about just because I don't know where to look. Mm-hmm. So if you come to me, I'm just here for that. So.
And it's just makeoklahomaweirder.com, and then there's a submission. Just go there, right?
Mm-hmm. It's in our menu. You can even go so far as to say makeoklahomaweirder.com/submissions. It'll take you right there. There's some tips about what we like, but honestly, send us anything. It means a lot to know that you've listened and have bothered to do the submissions process rather than trying to message me personally.
Right.
I have a platform for this. Let's try to keep it there as best as possible.
That's cool. So talking about music, if I pull up your playlist, it's going to be on your playlist, because I'm sure it's going to be pretty all over the place from what I'm hearing right now.
So you would think. Yeah. I'm not a big playlister. I'll start there.
Okay.
All the playlists I have are for the work I do with Make Oklahoma Weirder. It's all local music stuff. Yeah. We do have a playlist page with over 20 playlists. That's all local music. Some of it's themed. Some of it's based on cassettes we have for sale. Some of it is yearly, just like a giant mass. If you want to listen to 5,000 local songs, we got you.
Perfect.
But I will I'll pull up a actual playlist I have, because it is kind of all over the place. I try to listen to different things. But I've got a few weak spots that are just these are my comfort songs. And I think that's more what you're interested in. I really like contemporary classical music, minimalism, from the 1980s, like Philip Glass and Steve Reich, even though Philip Glass hates being called a minimalist. I like composers. I went through a big film score phase when I was a teenager. And so, but also the indie rock, of 2010 and so on. That was when I was really starting to really find myself in music. And so that stuff's really special to me. But
awesome.
I have a playlist. I might give you some idea. It's going to sound kind of normie, but then it's also going to sound kind of out there. And I think this will probably give you the best. This is my cheer up playlist. If I'm feeling bad, it's a thing that reminds me who I am. So my favorite song of all time is Under Pressure. Queen, David Bowie. Mm-hmm. So that's on here. It's the first song. We got some Radiohead, Doves, Elbow, Coldplay. So a lot of indie alternative stuff from the 2000s. Sigur Rós, Michael Giacchino, who's one of those film composers I talked about.
Okay.
Excellent guy who got his start doing video game compositions and is now an Oscar-winning composer who has actually gone to direct his own film. As Tall as Lions. David Byrne's a big one. Talking Heads, David Byrne. I love Talking Heads. I may like David Byrne's solo stuff even more.
Yeah,
and most people, it's the other way around. Animal Collective is a big one. Washed Out. Like I said, some of this is a little predictable, but it's very kind of indie alternative.
Sounds like it's soft. Intentional, depending on what vibe you're in. That's where you're going to pull up, sort of.
Yeah,
thing, right?
These are comfort songs.
Yeah.
But if I'm looking for something that's a little out there, I was thinking about somebody on the way over here. Somebody brought it up in a Discord I was in, and I was the only other person who knew who this was, and I was like, oh yeah. Scott Walker. There's this guy, Scott Walker, may he rest in peace. Been making music since like the mid 1900s, like crazy, just insane person. Kind of made some stuff that was borderline like easy listening when he started, and found great commercial success with it. And as you follow him aging into like his 70s and 80s, he just absolutely goes unhinged and does like the most obscure, dark stuff that's like, wow, we're throwing everything against the wall, but it's also like haunting, but kind of like extremely artistic, very avant-garde, like really out there. And it's like, man, usually people think about artists as like, oh, they kind of peak when they're younger, but here's a guy who like absolutely just went completely off the deep end as he went. Yeah.
Interesting. Awesome. So tell me about your title of Bingo King, right? Because that's another thing. Yes. Before we wrap it up, I think we definitely need to dive into that.
Yeah, no, that's fun. Bingo King. I did not come up with this title. It was given to me. So Apollo Woods runs a thing called OKC Black Eats, and it's been around for a little bit. He does a thing called, I'm not sure of the exact title, but it's Black Eats Restaurant Bingo. It happens during Black History Month in February. And for the whole month of February, he has a bingo card that you've got to go to the website, you download it, and it has these restaurants. And you have to eat at each one of the restaurants in a row, and then you get bingo. And so they're all Black-owned restaurants, and they're all over the place, like just really interesting stuff that you wouldn't necessarily even know. Oh, that's a Black-owned place? That's cool. And of course, it's really important if you're, dining at a place. Like if you're at all conscious as a consumer, like you like to know where your money's going. Yeah. And so like if I'm getting soul food or barbecue, like I want to make sure that it's really the people who are doing the work who's getting it, rather than somebody who like owns the place and has somebody else do the work, But yeah, he does this thing called Black Eats Restaurant Bingo, and I've made a habit of not just getting bingo, but blacking out the entire card. Yeah.
What are we talking about? How many places?
It varies from year to year, but this last year I did it. It was 50 restaurants.
Wow. Okay.
In 1 month.
That's dedication.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. Some of them are recurring restaurants, like Big O's Pork and Dreams is always on there. And then some of them are new. Like there's some things I had no idea. Like there's a couple ice cream places in Norman, Black-owned businesses. Cool. But yeah, he calls me Bingo King, and whenever I start posting, because part of the deal is you got to post and show your receipts, and it's like, I'm here. You post your selfies, you use the hashtags, all that entrepreneurial stuff to build a movement. And yeah, I'm the guy.
So you're like undisputed champ.
I am. It's to the point where people recognize me when I walk into the restaurant. Yeah, nice. Or if they don't, they see me later and they're like, "Oh, Bingo King."
Might lead to food reviews all of a sudden. It's a slippery slope. I don't know.
So I did some of that with the Gazette, actually.
You did?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I wrote about a few places. Man, if I would have stuck around a little bit longer, I probably would have covered Trompudos Tacos. Okay. Love that place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've covered a few random spots like Spunky's Soul Food. I did a review for them.
What's one thing that most people don't know about you? It's something
almost
I was like,
nobody knows about this. Yeah.
Let's do it.
No, I'm prepared. For those of you who were aware of pre-meme internet of the 2000s, there's a website called YTMND, which stands for You're the Man Now Dog. It's kind of came out around when 4chan was taken off. There was a thing called Something Awful. Like, this is pre-Web 2.0 stuff. This is like on the cusp of Web 2.0. And for a short time in my life, I was a creator and I was making memes before there were memes.
No way. Okay.
And I like to mention this because a big thing about a lot of the entrepreneurial stuff is like, chasing numbers and chasing stats, and like that stuff matters. But I think the work I did there is probably the most my work of any kind is ever going to be seen by anybody.
Okay.
And I was just an anonymous person under a different handle.
Yeah.
making these little, it's such a unique format. Video wasn't really where it was. This is like circa 2005, 2006.
Okay.
So what you would do is you would take like an animated image file and an audio, and you would like upload it, and it would be like a dedicated website. And so it would be considered sites. And so there were a lot of memes that came out of that. Some things that have actually like, had a lasting life beyond like, before Calvin Harris became Calvin Harris.
Yeah.
Calvin Harris.
Absolutely.
Probably.
Yeah.
He was doing some kind of obscure stuff in his earlier days. And like that stuff was meme music before there was meme music.
Okay.
Like there was a thing called LOL Internet that had like Ronald McDonald on a car.
No way.
With like, it was just like stupid stuff.
Yeah.
But I
typical internet though.
Yeah, it's like nobody there knows who I am. Like I was just some guy on a computer, and almost nobody in my life knows that I had that phase. And I will put a disclaimer that like it was the Wild West, and a lot of people did a lot of unsavory stuff up there too. Like parental advisory. There was some really like shock site stuff, like back in the day of Goatsy and all that. Like, good Lord. But
it sound like the old people saying it was the 60s. Everybody was doing it. Awesome.
Right. But yeah, there was a time when I regularly would make the front page doing these little jokes, and like I would get hundreds of thousands of views per thing I would make. And it's like, I'm never going to get that in music. I'm not going to say never. I mean, we just had Chayo on.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, it's a nice reminder of like, yeah, I had all that, but what did it really amount to?
Yeah.
I was just a random guy on the internet. I didn't monetize it. It was all free labor. I probably spent money, if anything.
I mean, that's what it's about. It's about following your passion. So I think that's super cool.
But I find that what I'm doing now, like even if it has less exposure, the exposure it gets is so much more meaningful. True. It's so much more real. It's in life. Like sometimes we're so locked off from each other virtually, like nothing compares to you and me talking in person. Mm-hmm. We can email, we can message, we can chat, we can Zoom, but in real life stuff, and this is what I really believe about live music, and we do live recommendations for local music every single week, because I really do believe like just getting to be with other people in the presence of art is way more.
That's humanity, right?
Yeah,
that's what we're about.
You don't get that from You're the Man Now, dog.
That's awesome. Well, before we sign off, where can people follow you? Right?
Oh, man.
I think you've got all kinds of projects going on.
Sure.
Is there a hub? Is there a social media? Let me know.
I'm trying. Well, we've got our website, makeoklahomaweirder.com. So if all the social media sites disappear, we'll still be there. We are on socials at WeirderOK, WeirderOK. Instagram, Facebook. Still figuring out TikTok, which we aren't even going to go there with current events. But Weirder OK on all socials. If you want to follow me personally, I'm also online at Jarvix Schmarvix. And yeah, sometimes I do music stuff, and sometimes I just post about other stuff, like going to a bunch of Black-owned restaurants.
Awesome. I like it. Yeah. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Super talented Evan Jarvix on the Maverick Podcast. Keep grinding, because in dreams we trust.